I have worked search and rescue in the Boundary Waters region of northern Minnesota for 15 years. Over 1 million acres of pristine wilderness along the Canadian border. Lakes and forests and portage trails that have not changed in thousands of years. I have participated in dozens of operations, looking for lost hikers, stranded campers, people who wandered off trails and could not find their way back. Most of the time, we found the missing alive. Sometimes we found bodies, and sometimes we found nothing at all. But I have never found what I found 2 weeks ago, and I do not think I will ever recover from it. My name is Wade Hartley. I am 39 years old, and I'm writing this from my cabin outside Ely, with the doors locked and a loaded rifle within arm's reach. I know how this story sounds. I know no one will believe me, but I need to tell someone, because what happened in those woods is not over. It is spreading. I grew up hearing the old stories, the legends that the Ojibwe people told about these woods, about a creature that lived in the deepest wilderness, a spirit of cold and hunger that preyed on travelers who ventured too far from safety. They called it the Wendigo. I never believed in those stories. I was a practical man who dealt in facts, in evidence, in the tangible realities of rescue work. Legends were for campfires and children's books, not for professionals who spent their lives in the woods. I do not believe that anymore. 2 weeks ago, a group of 4 hikers went missing in the backcountry. The search team found them 5 days later. All 4 of them, alive and unharmed, walking out of the wilderness as if nothing had happened. Everyone called it a miracle. Everyone celebrated the happy ending. But I had seen their eyes, had heard what they said when no one else was listening, had noticed the way they looked at the other members of the search team, the way their gazes lingered too long on exposed skin. The Wendigo did not kill those hikers. It did something much worse. It brought them back. The hikers who went missing were 4 friends in their late 20s, experienced outdoorsmen from Minneapolis who had been coming to the Boundary Waters for years. Grant Colby, Nina Westin, Paul Archer, and Diane Merrill. They had registered for a 5-day canoe trip into the backcountry, following a route they had taken several times before. When they did not return on the scheduled date, the outfitter contacted the ranger station. Search and rescue was mobilized. I was part of the initial team that went looking for them. The first 3 days found nothing. Their canoes were discovered at the 3rd portage point, pulled up on shore as if they had stopped for a rest. Their gear was still in the boats, food and water and camping equipment, but there was no sign of the hikers themselves. We expanded the search. More volunteers, aerial support, tracking dogs. We covered miles of wilderness, checking every campsite, every trail, every place 4 people might have sought shelter. Nothing. It was as if they had simply vanished. On the 4th day, one of the tracking dogs found something. A piece of clothing, torn and blood-stained, caught on a branch about 2 miles from where the canoes had been found. The blood was human. The tears in the fabric looked like claw marks. We prepared for the worst. I remember the grim silence as we pushed deeper into the wilderness, following the trail of blood, expecting to find bodies. We did not find bodies. We found something much stranger. It was the 5th day of the search, late afternoon, the sun already low on the horizon. The team had spread out across a section of old-growth forest, calling out, listening for any response. I heard something moving through the trees ahead of me. I called out, asking if anyone was there. 4 figures emerged from the shadows. It was them. Grant, Nina, Paul, and Diane. All 4 of them, walking together, moving slowly but steadily through the underbrush. They were dirty and disheveled, their clothes torn and stained. But they were alive, uninjured, upright. I radioed the rest of the team, told them I had found the missing hikers, told them to send medical support immediately. But even as I made the call, something felt wrong. The hikers were not acting the way people who had been lost for 5 days should act. They were not relieved, not grateful, not emotional. They just stood there, watching me, their faces blank and expressionless. I approached them carefully, asking if they were okay, if they were hurt, if they needed help. Grant, who seemed to be the leader of the group, smiled and said they were fine, said they had gotten lost but found their way back, said they were ready to go home. His voice was flat, monotone, like someone reading words without understanding what they meant. I noticed other things as the rest of the search team arrived. The way the hikers' eyes did not quite focus on anything. The way they moved in unison, turning their heads at the same moment, taking steps at the same time. The way they seemed to be listening to something that no one else could hear. And their skin. I was close enough to touch Grant when I noticed it. The skin on his hands and face was too pale, almost grey, with a faint bluish tint that suggested frostbite or poor circulation. But there was no sign of cold damage, no discoloration or swelling, just that wrong color, that dead color, like meat that had been left in the cold too long. The medical team checked them out and declared them healthy, dehydrated, hungry, but otherwise fine. A miracle, everyone said. A Christmas miracle in October. I did not think it was a miracle at all. The hikers were taken to the hospital in Ely for observation, then released to their families. The story made the local news, a feel-good piece about survival and the dedication of search and rescue volunteers. Everyone was happy. Everyone except me. I could not stop thinking about what I had seen in the woods. The blank expressions, the synchronized movements, the way Grant had smiled without any warmth in his eyes. Something was wrong with those people. Wrong in a way that medical tests could not detect. I started asking questions, casual questions, to the nurses and doctors who had treated the hikers, to the other members of the search team, to anyone who had interacted with them after the rescue. One of the nurses mentioned that the hikers had refused food for the first 2 days, not because they could not eat, but because they did not seem interested. They would sit in their hospital beds, staring at nothing, ignoring the trays that were brought to them. When they finally did eat, they consumed everything with a speed and intensity that was almost frightening. A member of the search team mentioned that he had gone to visit Grant in the hospital to check on him and wish him well. Grant had thanked him politely, asked about his family, made small talk. But the whole time, Grant had been staring at his neck, at his throat, at the place where his pulse was visible beneath the skin. And one of the doctors, speaking off the record after a few drinks, at the local bar mentioned something that made my blood run cold. He said that when they did the initial examination, they found something strange. The hikers' body temperatures were all several degrees below normal. Not dangerously low, just wrong. Cold-blooded, the doctor had joked, like reptiles. But the strangest part was that their temperatures never came back up. Even after days in a warm hospital with heated blankets and normal food, their bodies stayed cold, as if they had brought something back from the wilderness, as if the cold had gotten inside them and refused to leave. 1 week after the rescue, I was at the diner in town eating breakfast when I heard the news. There had been an incident at the Colby house where Grant had been staying with his parents while he recovered. The details were unclear. A neighbor had called 911, reporting screams coming from the house. When the police arrived, they found Grant's parents dead in the kitchen. Cause of death was not immediately clear, but there was blood, a lot of blood. Grant was found in the living room, sitting calmly on the couch, covered in blood that was not his own. He did not resist arrest. He did not say anything at all. He just sat there, staring at nothing, that same blank expression on his face. I went to the sheriff's office. I needed to know what had happened. I needed to understand. The sheriff was a man named Ed Kilpatrick, a friend of mine who had been working in the county for over 30 years. Ed looked shaken, pale in a way that I had never seen before. He said Grant had eaten them, not killed them, not attacked them, eaten them. The wounds on the bodies were not from a weapon. They were bite marks, human bite marks, dozens of them, tearing away flesh in chunks. Grant had consumed most of his father's forearm before the police arrived. Ed said Grant had not seemed violent or aggressive when they found him, had not tried to run or fight. He had just looked up at the officers with those blank eyes and asked if there was any more. I felt sick. I thought about the other 3 hikers, Nina and Paul and Diane, all of them released to their families, all of them walking around with that same wrongness in their eyes. I asked Ed if anyone had checked on the others. Ed went pale. He made some calls. The answers came back within the hour. Nina Weston's roommate had been reported missing 3 days ago. Paul Archer's girlfriend had stopped answering her phone. Diane Merrill's brother had not shown up for work in 2 days. All of them connected to the hikers who had come back from the woods. All of them gone, disappeared, presumably consumed by the things that used to be their friends and loved ones. The Wendigo had not killed the hikers. It had turned them into something like itself, and now they were spreading. I sought out Joseph Clearwater, an Ojibwe elder who lived on the reservation near the Boundary Waters. Joseph was in his 80s, one of the last people who still remembered the old stories, the old warnings, the old ways. I found him at his cabin, sitting on the porch despite the cold, watching the trees with ancient eyes. He did not seem surprised to see me. He did not seem surprised by anything I told him. Joseph said the Wendigo was not what most people thought it was. The stories told of a monster, a creature that killed and ate humans in the frozen wilderness. But that was only part of the truth. The Wendigo was a spirit, Joseph said, a hunger that could possess humans, turn them into vessels for its endless appetite. Once it got inside you, you were never the same. The hunger consumed everything you were, everything you loved, until there was nothing left but the need to feed. But the spirit could not possess just anyone. It needed people who had already tasted human flesh, who had already crossed that line. That was why the old stories were about cannibals, about people who ate other humans during harsh winters when food ran out. I asked what had happened to the hikers. How had the Wendigo possessed them if they had not been cannibals? Joseph's expression darkened. He said the spirit had learned, had evolved, had found new ways to spread itself. In the old days, the Wendigo waited for people to make the choice themselves. But now it had grown impatient. Now it took people into the wilderness, kept them until they were desperate and starving, and fed them what they needed to become vessels. I understood. The hikers had been missing for 5 days. 5 days without food, without supplies, lost in the freezing wilderness. And something had found them. Something had offered them a way to survive. Joseph said the possessed could not be saved. Once the hunger was inside you, it never left. The only mercy was a quick death before the transformation was complete, before the spirit spread to others. I asked how to stop it, how to kill something that was already dead. Joseph shook his head. He said you could not kill the Wendigo. You could only kill the vessels it wore. And you had to do it before they fed, before they spread the hunger to others. 3 of the hikers were still out there. 3 vessels already feeding, already spreading the spirit to new hosts. It might already be too late. I gathered a small group. Ed Kilpatrick, who had seen Grant's victims and knew something unnatural was happening. Frank Gustafson, a retired hunter who had lived in the Boundary Waters his whole life. And Joseph Clearwater, who knew the old ways and might be able to help us find what we were looking for. We started with the last known locations of the 3 remaining hikers. Nina had been staying with her roommate in Duluth. Paul had been with his girlfriend in a cabin outside Ely. Diane had been at her brother's house in Grand Marais. All 3 locations showed signs of violence, blood, torn furniture, the remains of meals that no human should have eaten. But the hikers themselves were gone, fled back into the wilderness, following some instinct that drew them away from civilization and into the deep woods where they had been transformed. We followed, tracked them through forests that were growing colder by the day, through territory that grew more remote and more dangerous with every mile. Joseph said the Wendigo called to its vessels, drew them back to itself, back to the source of their hunger. If we wanted to find the hikers, we needed to find the Wendigo. He said there was a place deep in the Boundary Waters, a place that the Ojibwe had avoided for generations, a hollow where nothing grew, where animals refused to go, where the cold was deeper and older than natural winter. That was where we would find what we were looking for. That was where the Wendigo waited. The journey took 2 days of hard travel through forests that grew darker and more silent the further we went. The birds stopped singing. The wind stopped blowing. Even our own footsteps seemed muffled, absorbed by the trees. The cold intensified as we approached the hollow. Not a natural cold, but something deeper, something that seeped into the bones and settled there. I found myself shivering despite my heavy winter gear, my breath forming clouds that hung in the still air. We found the hollow on the evening of the second day, a depression in the earth, surrounded by dead trees, their branches bare and black against the grey sky. Nothing grew there, nothing moved. It was a wound in the landscape, a place that seemed to exist outside the normal rules of nature. And in the center of the hollow, we found the hikers. Nina, Paul, and Diane were there, standing in a circle, facing outward as if guarding something. Their skin was grey now, their eyes sunken and dark, their bodies thin in a way that suggested they had not eaten in days despite the evidence of their feeding. Behind them, something else was there. Something that my mind could not quite process. A shape that was almost human, but too tall, too thin, with limbs that seemed to bend in too many places. It was made of shadow and cold, of hunger given form, and when it turned to look at us, I felt the weight of an ancient, terrible intelligence. The Wendigo. It did not attack. It did not need to. Its vessels moved instead, spreading out, surrounding us, their mouths opening to reveal teeth that had grown sharp and wrong. Frank raised his rifle. Joseph raised his hands, speaking words in a language I did not understand. Ed drew his service weapon, hands shaking. I looked at the things that had been hikers, that had been people with families and friends and futures. I thought about what they had become, what they would do if they escaped this hollow. How many more would be consumed by the hunger they carried? I thought about Grant eating his own parents, asking if there was any more. I raised my weapon and fired. The fight was chaos. Gunfire and screaming and the horrible sounds of the transformed hikers as they attacked. They moved faster than humans should, their bodies driven by something beyond muscle and bone. Frank went down first, pulled to the ground by Paul, who had been his neighbor for 20 years. I heard the sounds of feeding before I could turn around. Ed emptied his weapon into Nina, round after round, but she kept coming, kept moving, until a shot finally caught her in the head and she collapsed. Joseph was chanting, his voice rising above the noise, and I saw the Wendigo recoil, its form flickering like a shadow in sunlight. Whatever Joseph was doing, it was hurting the spirit, weakening its hold on the vessels. I killed Paul, then Diane, then turned my weapon on the Wendigo itself. The bullets passed through it, having no effect on something that was not truly physical. But Joseph's chanting was doing something, forcing the spirit back, making it retreat into the hollow. Joseph told me to run, said he would finish this, would bind the spirit to this place, would make sure it could not spread any further. But I needed to leave now, before the ritual was complete, before the hollow consumed everything within it. I grabbed Ed, who was injured but alive, and ran. Behind us, Joseph's voice rose to a crescendo, words of power that seemed to shake the very trees. Then silence, a cold, absolute silence that seemed to swallow the world. When I looked back, the hollow was gone. Just forest, ordinary forest, as if the depression and the dead trees and the ancient evil had never existed. Joseph was gone too, taken by whatever he had done, consumed by the ritual that had bound the Wendigo. Ed and I walked out of the wilderness alone. It has been 2 weeks since the events in the hollow. Ed is recovering from his injuries. Frank's body was never found. Joseph is gone, along with the transformed hikers, all of them swallowed by whatever happened in that place. The official story is that the hikers suffered a psychotic break, some rare condition triggered by their ordeal in the wilderness. Grant is in a psychiatric facility, unresponsive, still asking for food that no one will give him. The others are listed as missing, their cases unsolved. No one believes my account of what happened. No one wants to believe it. But I know the truth. I was there. I saw the Wendigo, felt its ancient hunger, watched it command its vessels like puppets on strings. I know that Joseph's sacrifice bound the spirit to the hollow, contained it, kept it from spreading further. But I also know that the Wendigo is not dead, cannot be killed, Joseph had said, only contained, only bound, and bindings can be broken. I have started paying attention to news from other wilderness areas, reports of missing hikers who come back changed, incidents of violence that do not make sense, rumors of things in the deep woods that hunger for human flesh. The Wendigo in the boundary waters might be contained, but there are other wildernesses, other spirits, other hungers waiting in the cold places of the world. And there are always more hikers willing to venture into territory they do not understand, to trust in their gear and their experience, to believe that the old stories are just stories. If you go hiking in the wilderness, in any wilderness, pay attention to the old stories, the legends that the indigenous peoples tell about the land, the warnings that have been passed down through generations. Those stories exist for a reason. They are not entertainment. They are survival guides, written in the language of myth, because the truth is too terrible to speak plainly. If you find yourself lost in the deep woods, if you run out of food and water, if you start to feel that terrible desperation that comes with starvation, do not accept help from anything you find out there. Do not eat what it offers you. Do not let the hunger drive you to do things that cannot be undone. And if you encounter hikers who have been missing for days, who emerge from the wilderness unharmed when they should be dead, look closely at their eyes. Look at the color of their skin. Notice whether they move in unison, whether they seem to be listening to something you cannot hear. If you see these signs, do not approach them. Do not let them get close to you. And whatever you do, do not let them feed. The Wendigo is real. The hunger is real. The transformation is real. And it is spreading, slowly but surely, one victim at a time. I have not been able to eat meat since returning from the hollow. Every time I try, I think about the hunger I saw in the hiker's eyes, the endless, bottomless need that could never be satisfied. I wonder if that is what it feels like to be possessed. If that hunger is always there, gnawing at the edges of your mind, waiting for you to give in. I wonder if I brought something back from the hollow with me. I wonder if I would know if I did. The cold has not left my bones since that night. I keep the heat in my cabin as high as it will go, but I still shiver. I still feel that chill deep inside me, the same cold that I felt in the hollow, the same cold that radiated from the hiker's gray skin. Maybe it is just trauma. Maybe it is just my mind playing tricks on me, making me feel what I expect to feel. Or maybe the hunger found me too. Maybe it is inside me now, sleeping, waiting, growing stronger with every day that passes. I look at the people around me differently now. I notice the way they move, the pulse in their throats, the warmth that radiates from their living bodies. I notice, and I look away, and I try not to think about why I noticed in the first place. The Wendigo did not kill those hikers. It brought them back. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder if it brought me back too.